What is up? Man, this is like deja vu for me. Being back here, seeing everybody, it's like going back in time or something. And I'm sure during my story, maybe I'll communicate some of that, but it's good to see old faces and old friends, people that years and years ago started doing ministry with. And you guys have always been in my heart personally. I want to thank Pastor Johnny Varican, Clint, for giving me this opportunity. I know you guys have a lot of vision for the future, and hopefully I can not hurt you too badly. And then, of course, Pastor Dwayne and Jeannie, even though I haven't been at RLCI conference since I started pastoring, maybe I'll make sense out of that as well. But Pastor Dwayne and Jeannie come up about once a year, and they've always been open, answers his phone, and just appreciate your leadership over the last 20 years and what you've done, the example you guys have left. And thanks for letting me cut my teeth up here for a little bit. This will be my first time speaking to senior pastors in my ministry life about senior pastoring. And I actually committed years ago to never do a pastor's conference because I do not know what I'm doing. And I've made more mistakes than wins or successes. So I want to say I already know. If you're out there, you probably have a lot to teach me. I'm not showing up as an expert in any way, shape, or form. That's not who I am. I am not showing up to celebrate some type of accomplishments that I've had in order for you to maybe feel like I should have a right to talk to you. I am returning after 10 years of pastoring more like someone that's been to war. And I've seen the carnage. I've seen wounded brothers. I've been the one people carried that didn't think that I could make it, but somehow I made it. I've been the one carrying people. And so I'm going to kind of speak mostly from that place. And I think Pastor Clint was primarily saying to me that there are a lot of guys in this room that are plateaued, in decline, maybe have recently taken over a church that is struggling, has been struggling, or you are involved in a church that some devastating blow was experienced. And so I'm going to without trying to bleed all over you, I'm going to try to keep a certain level of professionalism here, be as transparent as I can about our story, and it will be depressing to a certain extent. I'm going to not be a drama queen. I won't cry or any of those things. I don't expect empathy after this story. I knew what I was signing up for, because many people told me I shouldn't do it, that I would get in over my head. As a matter of fact, I had someone that had been in my life at the time who said, if you take that church, you'll destroy it. And at the time, I was offended. But after a few years, I'm like, they were right. I destroyed that sucker first. And then we killed it and brought it back to life. And so anyway, I didn't know I was doing it. It just kind of happened. And obviously other people knew that that's what would happen, but I didn't know that. I thought better of myself at the time. So I don't know, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, a month ago, I lose track of time anymore, but you can turn there if you want, John chapter 6. I was just in prayer and was reading a passage that we've all heard, so I'm just not going to reference it, just so I can leave time maybe to answer questions. So kind of how I want to do this is, you know, I probably am exposed to similar circles to you, but probably exposed to circles that you're not exposed to, just the way that God's kind of worked in my life. So I want you to be able to ask questions, because that's where I'll give you ideas, like stuff that you can go home and like plug and play. So I want to try to have some time to just throw stuff out like that you'll look back in a year and you'll be like, man, our church is way better because I got that idea. So I do think I have ideas that you may not be aware of. And so I'll feed you some of those. I want to do that. So I want to leave some time just to answer questions about anything. And we'll just tell you like what we found or discovered. And so I want to do that. And if you don't ask questions, then I've got like a couple backup things that I've shared with my staff, and I'll just keep going, and I'm going to try to take up a whole hour, which is not something I would normally be good at doing. But so anyway, so I'm just going to start off just kind of telling you a little bit about our story, and I'll kind of talk to you a little bit about the resolution of the story. But I was reading about, again, about a month ago in prayer, just reading through Scripture, and I was reading the story in John chapter 6, and it sounds similar, and you've read the story, but it sounds very similar to a lot of stories you hear about Jesus. He sends his disciples to the other side. They're on some kind of body of water, a lake, a sea, a something, and storms hit, and they almost die, and he comes out and rescues them, or something happens, and he calms the storm. He wakes up and calms the storm, and they eventually get to where they were supposed to go. John chapter 6 really doesn't have that. It doesn't have Jesus saying, peace be still. It doesn't have Jesus, walking on the water and then Peter courageously jumping out there with him. And there's none of those kind of things to this particular account, whether it was John's account or a totally different event, I'm unsure. But I do know that it spoke to me, and then I'm going to tell you my story, why it spoke so much to me. So the way it kind of goes is Jesus sends his disciples to go to the other side. And so this is obviously something that was in the heart of God for them to do. And that's all they're doing. This is in God's heart. They're following through with what is in God's heart. And the Bible says at the very end of that it's also a place that they wanted to go. So it's not just like God wanted them to do it and they really weren't into it, or Jesus was interested and they weren't interested. It was in their heart. There was a place that they wanted to go, and there was a place God wanted them to go. So they had a dream. They had something that they were wanting to accomplish, and it was also lining up apparently with what Jesus was wanting them to do. So they just kind of joined hearts, and they decide, okay, let's go. The scripture says that it's dark outside about this time, and so they begin to row. As they're rowing into the darkness of night, they're heading into deep waters. A violent wind begins to blow. The violent wind begins to blow. The water and the waves begin to increase. And as they do that, the life of the disciples, the apostles, were being threatened. And so right here, there's several things that let's just get out of the way. I'm not being deep right now. We see that Jesus sends them. We see that they want to go. They show up. They're in deep waters. It's a dark place. There's dangerous waves that the scriptures say are becoming larger and larger, that are threatening whatever was in the heart of Jesus for them and whatever was obviously in their heart. It is being threatened. It is all at risk. And then the Bible says something interesting, that Jesus comes walking on the waves. And the reason it caught my attention was because Jesus never one time stops the storm, removes the winds. Not one time does he lift the darkness. None of that's happening. He's walking on the very thing that's trying to kill his own apostles. He's walking on the waves that are destroying the vessel that they're using. They're rowing. It's not like they're lazy. They're putting the work in. They're disciplined. They know that there's a part that they play in it all. They're doing all that. And they're in the middle of all these circumstances. And I say this because for years, as I'll go back, tell our story of transition and, raising a church back to life from death. I say this because for me, for years, I was really, really good at saying that it was the devil, it was, this idiot, or this more, there was, if it wasn't for them and if it wasn't for that, and it was just a stupid decision, that human beings, have a, reputation of making. And so I thought I could mark all of the events that had worked against what I believe was in my heart, and I believed it was what was in God's heart. I believe all of those things, but yet none of this stuff looked in any way, shape, or form like God to me. It looked like the devil. Darkness, that's not the Lord. The Lord's not in darkness. The Lord's not in storms. The Lord's not in all that stuff. And so I had to come to this place because the scripture says until they received Jesus in it, The Bible says immediately they received him in it, and then they got where they wanted to go. So they had to receive him in all the mess, all the darkness, all the destruction, all the threats, all the deep waters, all the fears. If they didn't receive him in it, the Bible never says he stopped the storm. Never, that does not happen in this story. The second they receive him in, all of the threats that were coming against him, immediately they got where they wanted to go. And the Holy Spirit spoke to me immediately and asked me, have you really received that I was in all of that? Because if you have not, it's going to keep you from getting where I want you to go, but it's also somewhere you want to go. It's a place that was in your heart back then, and it's a place that's in your heart now. It's a place that's in my heart for you, but you have to find me in it to get to the other side. And so it's hard for me to find God in it because I took over a declining church. It was a very attractive church. And so just to set those of you up who maybe have taken over an existing church, let me help you understand, for those of you that are church planners, what taking over an existing church is like, all right? So taking over an existing church, this is what it is. There is a certain level of stupidity that you go into it with, because you believe that because there's a building and there's people there that you're going to have an advantage, okay? So that's the beginning. That's the seduction. That's how you get pulled into it. It's kind of like taking over a church for those reasons. Like there's land and there's income and I'll have a salary and all that. That's like dating a really, really pretty girl. Like she's just super hot. And then you marry her and you find out that she's got bipolar. She's psychotic. Okay, that's what taking over a church for the building is like, all right? Man, the building was great. You know, I have a salary, all right? Forget about the buildings and salaries, you know, because she's crazy. You just need to know it. She's crazy. There's a reason you're there. There's a reason she's in transition. There's a reason she's in decline. And probably there's a reason she hired you. She's not too smart, you know. Something's wrong with her. At least that's my story. And so I take this church because, you know, Pastor Dwayne asked me to. I was just being obedient to my spiritual authority at the time. And I will work out, you know, now you know why it's been a while since I've been here. Had other things I was working through. This wasn't another one I wanted to work out. And, you know, you're supposed to get all those things out of your spirit before you speak. And so I took over this church, and the truth of the matter is, the first year, it was like miraculous. I mean, it was, I'm not bragging because you'll see in a minute. I show up, and there's like 350 more people my first Sunday than were the previous 3 months in attendance. Like 350 people like more, and I'm like, yeah, they heard. They know who's here, you know. I'm like the next Rick Warren. You know, I'm like God's next great thing. And I never said that, but in my mind, I was like, you know, this only happens to, you know, people that are really anointed or something. And so the church begins to explode. My first 6 months, I have a $500,000 gift. Who gets that? You know, only guys that are like, God's going to like really raise up to do something really great, right? The church had been, you know, unkept for years because of issues with the pastor and sabbaticals he had been on. So it just had everything in the church, the carpets, every room, the furniture, the projectors had lines in them. I mean, there was just, the speakers were, I mean, everything was just as rough as it could possibly get, hanging on by a wire. And so I, you know, did this big push in the church. 1 month, we're gonna remodel children's, and we're gonna remodel this, and we're gonna remodel that, and we bring in $400,000 cash in a cash offering. Who does that happen for? Like only people that are really good leaders, you know, it's what they do. They communicate vision, and you know, the people stir up confidence in people, and that's my first 8 months. Quickly after that, I started to learn that the that gift that happened was just basically luck and probably the grace of God for us to survive the next season that I'm about to tell you about. So we learn pretty quickly that all the people that show up when you take over a church, especially if you're like young and stuff like that, and the word gets out, hey, there's a new young pastor in town. There's this whole demographic that exists inside of every city. And some of you might know this, some of you may not know this. But they're basically the people that they've been in almost every church for a period of time at some time. And everybody kind of knows who they are that have been in churches, that pastored for 10, 20 years. They've seen this group of people, like the hoppers. They just hop, hop, hop. They know exactly who they are, right? They know when they come to kind of like, kind of be nice and gracious, but their minds like kind of send out, the warning signals, hey, so-and-so's back. They're going to stir up something, I'm sure, at some point. And so, however you do that, I don't know how you do it. I'm a little bit more sensitive to those kind of things. So all these people show up, and I had no idea that that's this group of people that had basically worn out their welcome everywhere else, and now they're just going to show up there. I thought, that all these people were coming because of the vision and all those kind of things, and I kind of learned that when you take over a church, there is a certain kind of like, the way I would put it is, if you're driving down the interstate and you like see this really bad wreck, and everybody's slowing down, and we want to believe that it's because we're concerned. Like we want to make sure that we're, cautiously going by, but you watch everybody, and they're like, they don't care about anybody's safety because they're trying to see, like if an arm was chopped off or something like that, right? That's basically what all those people were showing up to experience. They're showing up to watch me fail. Like they're showing up to watch a disaster. They're not showing up because I'm great. They're showing up because they think it's going to be the most amazing thing to watch this guy crash and burn, because the prophecies have already been given. Ichabod has been written on the door of this place. The glory has left, and then they're just showing up to in some way or another reassure their past decisions of how this church isn't, the church that God is in. So that's kind of what begins to happen. So all those people begin to, work against things behind the scenes. They begin to trickle out. And then the senior pastor that planted the church, had been there for 23 years, sees that there's all these good things that had just happened pretty quickly, and he decides that he maybe wants it back. And I had been there not even a year yet, wasn't even 30 years old. And so most of the people in the church were older, and he had a lot of history with them. They got saved under him. They married, their kids, things. You get it. You get how the attachments, they got, baptized. You know how relationships work just over time. They were discipled by that church under his leadership. And, we went back and forth months and months and months of trying to find out if there was a possible win. There really wasn't a possible win for him in his mind, and so he ends up deciding to go, about 4 minutes away and start a church. And now, granted, you need to know that after about month 8, there had already been, before this one, there had already been 2 other church splits off of this previous staff members. So this is number 3 for us, right? So this is number 3, and this is a big one, right? This is a massive one because everybody on my staff I inherited from him. And so everybody on staff is in cahoots with him to take back what's rightfully theirs, the church. And I'm just some young punk that won the lottery, right? And they're going to take it back. They're the ones who built it. They're the ones who did it, and they're going to whatever. And so he starts working on planting a church. My finance lady is working with him on who all the big givers are, setting up his breakfast with them. And I couldn't get rid of the people that were on staff because they were all older. So they were all like 60 plus, been on staff for 20 plus years. Not only that, They had no employee files, never been written up, never had an employee review, never had any of those kind of stuff. So our attorneys are saying, you can't let these people go. There's all kinds of discrimination laws going on. I don't know what I'm supposed to say, not say. I'm just telling you my story, okay? And so Pastor Dwayne will tell me more about ethics later, or etiquette, I don't know. And so you don't bring me in if you want like a PR guy, right? The PR, that's like Jack Hayford. That's, the Gateway. That's, Robert Morris. I'm the guy you bring in to make everybody feel better about themselves. And so he made it. He made it. This is maybe I can do it too. And so we were in meetings as a board, that was there for almost every night, trying to figure out like what's the damage going to be, because our worship leader is going to be his worship leader, our finance person is going to be his finance person. We're paying them, but they're helping him. The executive pastor at the time is this guy's dad, and they're all working against, to them, well, even though I never even applied for the job, I never even sent in a resume. I was wanting to go to San Diego, and Pastor Dwayne calls me. Actually, I think it was Bobby. I don't remember which it was. All I remember is I got a call one morning and said, hey, got this church in Kentucky, and you came to our minds, because I'm right outside of Cincinnati, about 10 miles south. It's a suburb there. And I'm like, Pastor, man, I'm not going to Kentucky. Man, there's no way. And so they wanted me to go. They thought it was a good opportunity. Everybody was like, yeah, this is going to be really great for you. And that's about it. And then I went. It's kind of like getting married. You get married, right? And everybody's there at the ceremony, and you think everybody's for you, and then you're married, and then everybody leaves. And you're like where's all my friends? That's what taking a church is like. Hey, they think you're committed and it's all good, and you're like, I don't know. Yeah, this is crazy. So we start to go through that church split, and of course, every imaginable rumor begins to be spread, about us, and I'm a con artist. I stole the church from them. I lied. Whatever you have to tell people to make sense out of the fact that you stood up and said, hey, God's called me to not do this anymore. I've got to get my life together, blah, 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 blah. This is God's person, da-da-da-da-da. And then, change your mind a year later or whatever it was. So we started to go into all that. In the middle of all that, I'm talking about deep waters, dark place, right? Violent winds. This is the devil. This is not the Lord. Okay, just in case you're wondering, in my mind, the devil is attacking the church and it's division and all that. This can't be God. And I'm not saying God created it. I'm saying he's in it. And so we get news. My wife gets news that her family is falling apart. She's devastated. It was a horrible scenario that she was exposed to, came into the light that she didn't have any background, just was really surprised. And I'm in church meetings every night, church splits, people leaving. At one point in time, we had the balloon loan was 2 months away from being due, and our finances were declining, getting that $500,000 gift. Now you're like, this is what that's for, because we're actually forecasting how long we have before we're going to close the doors. That's what we're doing. We're running all the analytics on how long do we have, all the algorithms, how long before, if this happens and that happens. And I think we figured out at one point it was 6 months, 6 to 8 months, we could probably figure it out. And so we're in all of that. And so every single night I'm in these meetings, 5, 6 hours, at night. And she's home, being devastated over her family. And I'm not there. I can't relate. I come from the streets. My parents were divorced a long time ago. Just suck it up. We're adults now, big deal, And so my marriage begins to go into its trials and difficulties, and made it by the grace of God. And so we went through a lot of stuff in those early years. we stayed true. I love what Doug was sharing about the importance of altar calls. I remember at some point, Pastor Dwayne, I remember him mentioning, the way that you kind of know that God is with you is if people are getting saved. I don't remember how that came up, but so every single Sunday, all I knew for sure that I could do was I could give an altar call. I couldn't control if families would stay with us. And so I just kind of created this principle in my mind as I'm driving home from church, no matter how many families I heard left that week. And it was never like, 100 left one week. It was like 5 or 6 this week and 3 or 4 that week. And it just was the constant trickle. Made it worse. You're just like, would you just let me know what I'm dealing with here? And so we would give altar calls, and as long as someone would get saved on my way home, that's what I would tell the Lord. I would say, I know that you are still with us because I know that no one comes to the Father unless they're drawn by the Father. I know that you are with us. I know that somehow or another you'll see us through that. And that is the part of it that, again, without bleeding too many details, it didn't happen overnight, us coming out of it. It was a real 5 to 7 years, slow and steady. It's not a success story. You won't see me write a book about it. If I do, I'm not going to tell the story that, 6 to, I think 4,600 people or whatever is our average or something. Whatever, we're in the process of a $20 million building project that breaks ground next week. It's like that stuff. That's what most people write about and tell you about. I love to know the story behind the story. Let's give some facts, because I could just take just a minute, and we're just going to kind of do this, and I could almost walk you through any mega church story, especially explosive in our country, and I could show you how at a key time another mega church right around the corner fell at the right time when they were in the right place, poised to do it, and they exploded. And I'm saying this because it is so wrong for us to show up in a time like this. If you're in decline, if you're in a difficult place in your church, or your church isn't thriving, or there are things we can do, and I will do what I can do to help with that. But I'm saying to compare yourself to these other stories, they're not telling you the story behind the story. And I could pull up names right now, and I could tell you what they wrote in the first 2 chapters of their book, and it's lies. And it's not lies because they're lying. It's lies because they're not telling you what's really happened. You don't just open up and 4,000 people show up. No advertising, no sign, nothing. Oh, how did it happen? We just don't know. And then everybody goes around and starts doing that. It's not real. It's not the way it happens. And no one tells the story behind the stories. So I'm here to set everybody at ease. You are not better because you're bigger. It's a zero. Circumstances, a million circumstances play into why, when, how, where. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about that and just the idea and questions and answers. If you have started or planted, or you are taking over a church in the last 10 years, chances are if there are any thriving churches around you, there's not going to be a whole lot of low-hanging fruit there in those environments, unless you're waiting for a big church to collapse and then you can pick up some people there. That's not really the way that it is. The days of just having good music, consistent programs, good youth, good kids, all those kind of things, and decent, excellent facilities, and just having something about you that's not too much to get over as you communicate, then and you can grow a church. Those days are over. Everybody has that. Everybody has good bands. Everybody sings Hillsong. Everybody, has access to good content and good sermon materials. It's not just a special few, that have these really great ways of knowing how to get it. Now you can just go online and get it all, so everybody can get good content, good sermons, blah, blah, blah. So that's not really what's going to do it anymore. People get facilities now. People get flow and how things are to work together. For the most part, we're not in the crowd of those kind of things. So there are ways to build a church today in the current climate that I believe we had to build our church in. So I'll help maybe throw some things out there like that. Because again, we had to build our church when our reputation was horrible because of the former guy in and of himself. Then if anybody still was okay with him, then he kind of went ahead and took that away from us. And so no one came my first probably 7 years, we did not experience someone coming to our church and they said, you know what, we were going to Grace for 5 years. You know, we were going over here to First Baptist Florence. We were up over here going to, Crossroads, and they're just too big. And so we thought we'd check you out. None of that happened. And so we had to authentically figure out, how are we going to reach people that are far from God, because we weren't going to get the other things. That was not going to be our story, because no one that knew anything about religious church circles wanted to come to our church. And so we had to figure out how to do that. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But we did receive God. We did receive the Lord in it. And we are in a place where we believe we're healthy. We believe we're strong. We believe that we can help in some practical ways. And so that's kind of our story. Did I miss anything, Clint, that I should have talked about? And so, again, do not feel sorry for me. Don't send me an email saying, man, I just feel really bad. I should have maybe reached out to you and prayed with you or something like that. No, please don't. Those days are over. It's all good. And but now you kind of know why I've maybe been a little distracted, and just was in survival mode for a lot of years. And so, but we're coming up. We just passed year 10, so we're going into year 11. And so all of that's really, years behind us now, And we've been growing for years now, and God's blessing us in a lot of ways. So I'll just open it up for questions. I'll say a few things you can ask questions about money. You can ask questions about small groups, youth programs, internship programs, college ministry. You can ask systems, leadership, how you identify leaders, how you develop leaders. You could volunteers. How do you know? How do you do all that? I could give you all our stats, all our analytics on where we're kind of at. I could probably pull it up. So yeah, go ahead.
What was key in transitioning from the bleeding to starting to grow?
Okay, so it wasn't like it was never cut and dry. So what we were doing is, imagine like a guy's he's messed up, right? He's messed up, and it doesn't look like he's going to make it, but everybody's kind of on it. There's like life support and all of that happening, and then like the surgeon turns his back and everybody comes and takes the life support off, right? And everything's like code red. That was our situation. So we just did whatever we had to do at the moment. So grabbing this tourniquet over here, getting this blood stop here, and then, okay, it's this one over here, and we just stuffed, just like, and that's what we did. It was just try to keep it alive. And there's no secret to this day. It was bad. And to be honest with you, it was never like, it's still never been all good, all bad. That's not really how it works. You kind of get through the storm on one side of it, and then another, and then another. So I think it was just picking one thing off at a time and handling it and overcoming it. Pastor Dwayne, one of the best pieces of advice he ever gave me in coming here is the worst thing is not going to be the people that leave your church. It's going to be the people that stay and sit in the pew and want you to fail. And that couldn't be more true. And I said, what do you do? I remember asking this. I was like, what do you do? He said, outlive them. That's what we did. We just made a decision. I'm not going anywhere. I made a decision when I took this church. I made a covenant with the Lord before the people, like David did, and I believe it was 1 Samuel chapter 6. Made a covenant with the Lord in front of the people that this was a lifetime assignment. And I didn't know when I made that covenant with the Lord in front of the people that I would go through what I went through. And so many times I wanted to break that covenant with the Lord and with those people, because the people I made the covenant in front of were gone. So I felt like maybe the covenant, was obsolete at that point. But we just stayed true, stayed consistent, stayed strong. It was nothing, we worked hard. If there's one thing we always did, I know everybody's like, well, I work hard. We knew, I think I read somewhere one time, and I don't remember where, and again, I just made a decision I was going to talk to you guys. But we made a decision at some point that we weren't first in our city. We weren't first. So nothing we did was going to be I've got, I think, Crossroads where we're at. they've got like 3 or 4 facilities. They open up $30 million facilities about once a year. So they about 30,000, 25, 30,000. So we have that church in town. So I wasn't going to do anything that was going to like no one had ever like seen, for the most part. So we just made a decision. We weren't first. We weren't the largest. We are the largest church in northern Kentucky, which is about 4,000 people in the tri-state now, and they do have a church right across the street from us, and I take great pride in that. I wasn't competitive when I went there against other churches, but now I am, and I'm trying to get over that. And so that's another story I'll tell sometime. Um, I want them to win, and I want to win too. How about that? I don't care if they win. I just want to win too. I'm not going to let them win at my expense. How about that? And so you got to stay on your toes sometimes, because you can't be ignorant that people like to be a part of a place that's winning. So I mean, you got to kind of stay sensitive to that spirit and the psychology of all that too. So I would say we didn't do anything, one thing. We just didn't quit, and we made a decision. We weren't going to be first. We weren't going to be the biggest, so we will outwork every other church in our city. And that's what we did. We just outworked everybody. So I didn't have like great people on my board, like, hey, take a sabbatical. It's like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, right. It's like, I got to work, I got to work. People are leaving. This is getting crazy. I got to work. So we just worked really hard and but we were built for it too. I felt like I was built for it. I mean, I'm wired for it. Now I kind of miss all those days of threats and risk, and I've got my own now. I'm dealing with a few different ones, but for the most part, nothing like those days. I mean, that was nasty. It was nasty. What do they call it? The old timers call it the dark night of the soul. Yeah. So I know that maybe isn't nuts and bolts, but I do think that there are certain things that you can just roll up your sleeves. And I'm not saying work hard like set up chairs, even though it can include that. I'm not saying work hard, make sure stuff's picked up off the carpet, even though I think that none of us are too big to do anything. I'm saying, because a lot of times we don't want to answer the bigger problems in an organization, so we get busy on the little things that are kind of meaningless, and then we think, well, I got all these things done today, and you're like, but yeah, a volunteer could have done those things, and why were you doing them? And so I'm talking like, hard work on the big issues. What's the spiritual condition of our city? What does our city really need that's unique? What's no one else doing that we're doing? What kind of church do we want to be? Close my eyes and say, what kind of worship do I like? What kind of preaching do I like? What kind of ministries do I like? What changed my life? What do I have? And then building that kind of a church, because I kind of had a blank slate, even though people were still hanging out. So I just closed my eyes and said, and that's where Seven Hills came from. We just relaunched a church that was named after the region, and we're going to go after the region. And so, so we just, did all the hard work, but on the bigger things that usually when you transition a church, you're kind of taking over what somebody else did the whole time and trying to move it. And can we change the name now? And can we change the vision statement this week? And all that stuff. At some point, I just like, forget it. I'm just changing it all. And that's how we did it. So, yes, sir. Oh, okay. He's got a mic if you've got questions.
Thank you. Marcus, at one point you said you were basically alone. And now, I imagine you have staff and you've got an inner circle and the people that you run with. You've got Matt here with you. So how did you work that process out? Or how was that process of feeling like you were alone, everybody else was faithful to somebody else, and to coming to a point to where I can trust this guy. This is a person with potential. How'd you grow your team?
Okay, so first thing I did was I remember going to a staff meeting and saying, hey, we're no longer going to have staff meetings. You no longer are obligated to even keep hours. If I need you, I'll call you. God bless you. And walked out of the room. And then I just met with the people that I knew were on my side, which when Matt came on, it was just Matt. And that was that. And then I started to try to get, because I didn't have money, because I was paying the people that weren't on my side, and there was all kinds of politics. And even if I did get to the point where I could fire that person or, promote them, however you want to say that, promote them onto their next assignment, we elevate them to what God is wanting them to do now. And they they usually had some type of big severance. I was trying to buy peace at the time. I believed you could do that, and I don't know if it worked or not. We're here, so it was just trying to treat people right. It wasn't their fault. It was messy. It was weird. Just trying to be kind to families the way I'd want somebody to be to me if I was in that scenario. So that's what we did. We just kind of couldn't hire somebody because we were in severances or in whatever, and so I would just like grab a young person. Or I remember with our worship team, for example, this would be a good, like, just a picture of it. All the people on the team were all like older guys and like not hipster, like biker, and they all, would had music stands on stage. I'm not against music stands if you use them. They would sit down like on, I don't know, like, yeah, I feel bad about sitting down now, but like they would sit down on bar stools, and it wasn't a big deal, but they would sing, like, it kind of felt like early 90s, late 80s vineyard music, and I wasn't like against it or anything like that. It just wasn't like where I was at. So I tried to introduce new songs, and they were all kind of resistant to whatever. And so I just took, because I was a youth pastor, I know young people grow up really fast. And the way I did my first band as a youth pastor was I just asked people if they were interested at all. Because we didn't have a band, so I said, are you interested? There was one, but most of them were gone. So are you interested? So I was talking to Ron Rands in Germany. He was one of the people that there he is, Jeremy's right there, right? You remember how, and we made him practice to learn us one song. So that's what I did as a youth pastor. They were all young, and then they grew up into this like really dynamic, music thing. So that's what I did as a pastor. So there were about 2 or 3 years there. If you came and spoke at our church, all the people on stage were in middle school. And I said, I know young people grow up fast, and soon enough they're going to be incredibly hip and cool. And if you came to my church now, you'd be like, man, how much does that guy cost? I'd be like, nothing, But he's so cool. I know. I kind of could predict that this guy's going to be like pretty cool at some point. And so our whole worship team is just basically organically raised up. We've hired some of the head people up, but that's what we did with our team, is just, who did I feel wasn't tainted. It was really what I went for, and then we just started to work from there. And so it wasn't a lot, and then we'd add another person, and then another person, and then another person. And so mostly from our world. Matt came sort of from the outside, but at that point you couldn't hire from the inside. So he was a relationship of mine from the church that I was at in Atlanta. So that's kind of how that one came about. So I kind of had a change agent with me, someone that would go into the battle with me. But after that, for the most part, we would start hiring people that were new to the church since I came. So we, for the most part, have always hired from within. The exceptions that we've made have only been twice outside of Matt, and it's been one guy that his dad's one of my best friends, and he was 12 years old when I started mentoring him. Another guy I went to college with, and so outside of that, it's internal. We raise them up from the inside. It's been our world. It's been our way. Yeah, he's doing great, and honestly, he's got the people that left our church, and they've got the church that they wanted, and they still hate us, from what I hear, and we look at it like, obviously, God needs a place for them to be, and they seem to be happy. And I know he preaches Jesus, and I know he's a Bible guy, and I know all those things, So it's like, at the end of the day, that stuff's just kind of like water under the bridge for me. I'm not going out to coffee with them or whatever, but that's more just because of my style. like not really him. It's just like I just don't want to, you know. I got other people I'm interested in, kind of thing. So any other questions? Yes, Pastor Wayne.
Yeah, you mentioned doing church today.
Yeah.
Doing it different. What would you like to share about that?
Doing church today, doing it different. I would say, because I would look at say how there were really good strategies on here. In our church, it would not matter how big the guest speaker was, how nationally known he was. Nobody in our church would know him. No one would know. If Jesse Duplantis came to our church, no one would come, or the people that would come wouldn't like our church. Okay, so I think Jesse Duplantis is amazing, but that's not going to grow my church. That would probably hurt my church. So that's the first thing, that doesn't really work for churches like mine. Not saying that it still doesn't work and all that. You bring all the Christians in and all that kind of stuff, but it didn't work for us. So that was one thing we couldn't do. So that's one thing we couldn't do, because those church people, they didn't like us. So we'd be bringing in a bunch of people that didn't like us. So we had to go away from that kind of strategy. You have to be, so that's one thing that's different. So you have to use things that are attractional to your church, which for us are primarily was I was praying one day about God, give us a heart for our city, or give us our city. And God said to me, just give yourself to the city. And so we just started saying, praying to the north, the south, the east, and the west. Let them come, God, into our door. We just started thinking differently. How can we go into our city? So we ask ourselves a question every single week in staff that we have to answer, and we don't leave until we answer it. What's one thing we're doing in the community this week to let people know we're here? And we're and now it's not just feeding the homeless, right? That's great, because we've broken it down into the 7 different sectors. If you've ever heard Lance Winall, the 7 mountains, and works with us, 7 hills. So just the health sector, school sector, educational sector, however you want to play it out. If you don't have that, I can give it to you. We can send it to you. But so we're really intentional at going into those things. So this last year, for example, we gave 100,000 volunteer hours to our community. That's volunteer hours, and our local outreach budget is $900,000. So we go nuts. That's not including people that give money, like for backpack outreaches, Christmas, Thanksgiving, all those kind of things. So that would be another $300,000+ on top of that. So we're very focused on local outreach. Say, what does that look like? Just serving our community. Whatever the needs are, we serve our community. So Matt Jones, who's here, when I first got there, we did our first little trying to serve. We went to all the schools or whatever. Hey, is there anything we can do for you? Whatever, and none of them returned our calls. Now we could give you the numbers, but it's hundreds of schools call us for everything they need. Backpack supplies, meals for Christmas, Thanksgiving, Christmas in all the schools. We provide, we don't just give them a little shoebox. They give us their Christmas list. We give them to people in our church, and we go buy Christmas for these families. So we just have always done it that way. But it's really less about that. It's that, but it's also about, to us, coming alongside of the people that are on the ground, seeing the real needs in our educational system, in our nonprofits locally, in the government, people that are leading in our community, making sure they know that they have someone they can lean on. One thing they don't have is they don't have volunteers. I have an army of volunteers I can dispatch like that to help meet needs. So if there's an elderly family in the community, let's say that their gutters are breaking, and that means that they're getting tickets, but they can't fix it. Well, the government, or the local government, they don't have anything that they can call us. We send a team of people to go over, fix it, and stuff like that. We could go on and on, but for Matt, for example, we went and started serving all the schools. Did it for years. Never asked for anything. We sponsor every single prom, homecoming with DJs and all that kind of stuff. We don't play Christian music. We just go in, and what they would spend on a DJ and lights and their presentation, because we have all that stuff. We're at church. We have all this stuff. We just send them in, and we, for free, do all their homecomings. And we'll send a staff, or 10 staff and 54 interns, for example, this year will be at every single homecoming, every single prom, doing everything. We clean up, we set up, we do whatever. We're not there preaching. We're not saying anything. We're just we're just there, just hanging out. But you know what? We're rubbing shoulders with the school administrators. We're serving them. No, don't worry about that. We got that. That's why we're here. That's why you guys ask us to come. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? It's what we feel like God's called us to do, make the community better. And this is what you ask us to do. If you ask us to go clean toilets, that's what we'll do. Whatever you want us to do. We're just here to help. We're just here to help. Well, we don't, why? What's the intention? What's the hidden motive? Well, for us, we want our community to be great because we live here, and if that's selfish, then make it so. But we believe we're supposed to be a part of making this place better. So whether that's through doing landscape down the mall road, or whether that's doing landscaping at schools, it doesn't really matter how they define it. So a good example of the fruit of something like that is, how many school assemblies did you do last year? So last year we did 17 school assemblies. How many students did you talk to?
Over 10,000.
Okay, so you might be saying, well, how can we get in schools to preach to young people? We never asked that question. We just said, what can we do for you? But it led to a principal saying, hey, what do you guys know anything about the bullying stuff? Do you have any resources, people we can send in? And Matt is intelligent enough. He's like, of course, absolutely. We actually have an entire program we can produce to meet that need. And he's like, yeah, great, do it. And he's like, what will it cost? We can give you this much. It's like a couple grand or something. They have for their assembly a budgets. And we said, absolutely not. We will do this for you. So he put together this huge production presentation, sermon where he's just flat preaching, other than he just doesn't reference the Bible or say Jesus or God. But I mean, he's up there just slaying it, just getting those kids' business, just in their face. Kids are crying and all that kind of stuff. Public high schools, and so we did that, and we'll have gazillion more this year, but 17 last year that we did. And we will custom fit those for any school. Choices right before prom about texting, whatever. So you say, well, how did you speak to 10,000 students in your community? That's the idea that we want. We'll help you with all that. But if that's all you want is a platform to speak, then can you sustain it? Can you sustain being there year after year after year? And I just think you start with the small stuff. How can we serve? And so just, Pastor Dwayne, to answer your question, just rolling up our sleeves and loving our community.
When people leave, not that we need to appease them or even should try, but spiritually speaking, as pastors, what's our responsibility, and at what point can we feel released, or should we feel released from trying to pursue or make things right? Because sometimes, even in our church, people are leaving and they just hate our guts, and you're like, all right, well, that's great. So where's that limit, that line?
I do think that there are some things that you can set up to prevent backdoors, and that's probably better to talk about if you want to re-ask a question there. But once people have decided to leave, I've never experienced, if you don't have the ways to prevent that, or at least to limit that, because there's a way to limit it outside of like disasters, like somebody molests somebody, or one of your youth pastors sleeps with a student or something like that. Then you're done. You just got to outlive that. But normal, week in, week out, just the nature of people, that they just, grass is always greener. So there's ways we can create that. But outside of that, I have never one time chased someone and it worked. And we've had thousands of people leave our church. And I've tried 100 times. We send letters, emails, books, cards, can we get coffee? Can we get dinner? The best thing you can do is if they come to you, that's amazing. But I don't even get that. Like if you're at the places, you're a pastor and people actually come to you, like I would just love that. Just like say bye. So I could just be like, bye, like, thank you, like, thanks for your time here. I hate that I couldn't be more. I hate that I couldn't be better. I'd probably leave me too. Like, I get it. I constantly am dealing with my own inadequacies, and I get that there's probably something better for you. I just wish I could say that, but they don't give you that opportunity. You know. So, but with that being said, I've never seen anyone leave our church and go to another church and their life be better. Never. Not one time. They stay the same spiritually. Their family, most of the time their kids end up messed up. And I'm not saying it's because our church versus that church. I'm saying the mentality where you are not planted in a local church and that isn't a priority to weather storms and to show grace up to your leaders and believe in the best and love the house of God. Anybody that just jumps ship, it's never. They, in your mind, just have great compassion because they're usually in again, if a church is really in a struggling thing and people leave to a healthy environment, I think that's a little different. I'm just saying if you're in a healthy environment, they're like, it's too big, or, you don't do this enough or that enough. I don't know. I usually don't see that work out. I'm not saying they get cancer and die. I'm saying that it's not like they elevate significantly with that mindset of things. So I think I'm almost out of time, so okay, go ahead.
Could you talk a little bit about the leadership culture on your team? How would you describe that?
Very, very strong. I'd put it against any team in America, no question about it, even though we're not very known. That's, in my opinion, even intentional. So we, very strong leadership team, very strong leadership culture. And you have to be a strong leader in our world because of the way we develop from within. So we're always looking for who. So we already know who Matt's replacement is, and Matt knows who his replacement is. Period. Well, why is he want? Why, is that like not job security? We just don't think that way. There's always something bigger and greater and next. Somehow or some way, it's always about growing up and out and finding ways to expand our own leadership, our own capacity, and the kingdom. So it's a very strong, what is our leadership culture like? It's a very strong leadership culture. Outside of that, I would maybe, I could give like some qualities to it that might help you, things that we feel like are, unique to us. We aren't super religious. That doesn't mean we're loose living, but we're not really religious, so we're not really surprised by sin. We do our very best that we don't want to know about sin. Like what do you do if a couple comes to your church and they're like living together? We may find out about it and help them, but we don't go to get into people's business all the time. We'd prefer just the Holy Spirit do his work there. So we're not really religious on that side of it. We aren't mean-spirited. And I know it sounds really like basic, but we're just really gracious. We're really kind. We're really warm. We're really hospitable. There's no big eyes, little U's in our environment. That's just not our environment. So you come into our environment, position is not celebrated. What's your title here? Your title there. We just don't really celebrate that stuff. We have a board, but we don't call them deacons or elders. I think it's great if you do. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for us in our world, we celebrate the people that actually do it, not the people that have some kind of something. But so just no big eyes, little U's. Is a big deal, Matt? Am I missing something? Just really grace-filled. We're just really gracious. Don't beat yourself up. You'll get on the other side of this. I know Pastor Dwayne's that way. Just come on, let's just get on with it. No shame. We don't guilt trip. We don't. There's no secrets. We'll tell somebody if something's going on. We're not like anglers, we're not, we don't have secret agendas, none of that stuff.
Like you said, being in environments where you always feel like you're in trouble when you're not in trouble.
Yeah, so that's very true. Like in a really insecure environment, if the staff's honest, they feel like their job's always at risk, maybe, or they're always in trouble. They get a call from the pastor. Oh my God, what'd I do today? We don't do that. So they should get way more calls from me about celebrating that they're doing great than oh no, they're doing bad. And there might be, don't get me wrong. I don't want to like come off as like I don't lead the church, but I don't lead it with fear. I've never said, you do this or your job, blah. Never made that statement. People don't feel like they're going to lose their jobs. That's just not a part of our culture, And it happens. As a matter of fact, it's happening right now. By the way, I think, is it 2:30? No, at 2:30 it's happening to someone that doesn't know it. So it does happen. I don't want to paint too pretty of a picture for you. And that's the fact that they don't know it is part of the problem. So anyway, what's that? Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm fine. It doesn't matter. Again, our leadership culture is strong. We push through all that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we value people willing to do the little things, but we are very picky about staff members that won't let go of little stuff. Like that's a turnoff to us. Like you dropped off the basket for the guest speaker. You built the display for the men's conference. Make sense? Like that's kind of like, you know, you should be empowering people to do that stuff, the little stuff, empowering people to do it. So we value people in the grind with everybody, but we really value people that know how to not be taskmasters. In other words, like their style of leadership is they got like 50 little minions running around doing, I don't know, just leading people and spending time with them, investing in them, loving them, doing life with them. It's the basic things, them knowing that you care for them more than you care about them doing that right there for you. And that balance between leadership and just, again, having a bunch of minions running around, We have all kinds of nicknames for those things in our world, but that maybe helps you. Well, it's 12:29. My time is out. I've enjoyed it. Thanks, Pastor John. Thanks, Pastor John. Thank you.